everyone. This is Brianna Miko.
Hope all is well. I'm Ava Adams.
And I'm Tessa Stevens, and thanks for joining us.
We're here for connecting and supporting people,
sharing relatable moments,
always encouraging and always growing. We're
practically
social work.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Practically Social Work. Today we have a special guest. We are interviewing Vonne Martin with the Center for Popular Democracy. So thank you for coming and joining us today, and I'll let you have the mic.
Thanks for having me, y'all. I appreciate it. And yes, my name is Vonne Martin. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Deputy Director of Campaigns at the Center for Popular Democracy, which means out of the 11 campaigns we run on all kinds of issues, of all of the 11 different campaigns, I am on the leadership team to help us make sure we are winning the fight to reach the goals all of our campaigns have.
I think you did a good job explaining.
Do you want to expand a little bit more on it?
At the Center for Popular Democracy, we work across the country. We're a national organization. We work with about 35 grassroots organizations in 45 cities, including Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Those grassroots organizations usually work on multi-issue campaigns, policy and practice campaigns that really get everyday people organized around the issues that affect our lives, the issues that have been around since kind of the start of this country, things that are pervasive under a country living in capitalism and white supremacy. So we work on trying to bring equity and bring, in some cases, equality into the communities that we live in. Some of those issues are around like housing justice and economic justice, ensuring people have a living wage, ensuring people have access to social housing, green housing, make policy to ensure that landlords aren't raising the rent in ways that are not sustainable for our communities, thinking about housing as a human right, education justice and police reform, and transportation of our criminal legal system, trying to fight against policies that continue to lock up Black and brown folks, instead of putting those resources into things like mental health and social work and jobs and green space. There are lots of other campaigns we run. There are campaigns around the fight for justice in Puerto Rico and all kinds of work trying to hold Wall Street accountable. And my role in particular is around our education justice work, including the fight to get police out of schools and to actually invest in the things young people need to learn and grow and thrive, like social workers, like literally that's the campaign. And for mental health supports and academic rigor, things that don't actually put them on the school to prison pipeline and further criminalize them. I work on that campaign as well as our climate justice campaign and trying to lower the emissions in this country and across the world. As I'm sure y'all know, climate change is real and we're not doing enough, and fossil fuel companies aren't doing enough. So we fight to reverse the effects of climate change and center that change in communities of color and low-income communities. And then thirdly, on the immigration fight, brown and Black people, both new immigrants and folks who have been here for a while, continue to face all kinds of justice issues. So really fighting to reform the immigration system are the three campaigns. Well, four, because I also do criminal legal work. Most of my responsibility is supporting organizations on the ground in moving that work. And that can look different depending on the day, but I'm trying to ensure that we empower people on the ground to fight those campaigns.
Wow, you summarized that really well. That's a lot.
Wow.
Awesome.
So much. That's a lot, Vonne.
Yeah, it is. But I'm trying to keep it to the
Wow.
point. That's important work.
How did you get into this kind of work?
Good question. So I actually got involved as a high school student. I was a freshman in high school when I stumbled upon a meeting being led by Californians for Justice. They're a statewide organization fighting for racial justice and education justice across the state. And they organize young people to observe, call out the conditions in their schools, and then build campaigns to fix those. I got involved because organizers are pesters. If they're doing their job well, they will call you all the time, and that's what happened. And they will give you a role immediately, something to hook you and keep you going or keep you coming back. And that's what they did. And they saw some leadership qualities in me. I was given roles, I was given responsibility. As a young person, I needed a place to belong. And that's what community organizing also does, right? It allows people to build community, build family, and get invested in to do work that's bigger than ourselves. And that's what I felt. I got involved in that way all throughout high school. I went to college. CFJ, California for Justice, was opening a site in the city I moved to. And so I remember getting hired on my 20th birthday. And I stayed with them from the ages of 20 to 31. And I kind of went up the ladder as a part-time organizer, a lead organizer, and then eventually the organizing director, which I was overseeing like the leadership development, the program, the curriculum, the facilitation, the base building, so we could grow our numbers and get more young people involved across the state. That's how I got involved, and I stayed involved. They hooked me.
That's amazing. That's amazing that you were at one job for, I think you said 11 years, and you
Yeah.
just worked your way up as a young high school student. That's awesome. But what do you think? What would you share with people about the most important aspects of social justice?
I think the most important parts are realizing that it's a long fight. There's a long arc to freedom, right? But it always bends towards justice, because it can be really challenging. It can be disheartening. You can feel really down when you're fighting against, let's say, immigration reform, and you got Democrats who are supposed to be more progressive putting forth more regressive that like detain, separate families. It feels like you have a long battle ahead of you. And that's for almost any of the fights that anything around defunding police and trying to get other public institutions that actually support communities and families. Again, you got Democrats talking about we need more police. Like, it is an uphill battle, is my point. And so one thing to remember is to, as I said before, like community and building relationships with people is what keeps you going, and to take breaks, whether you're doing micro social work or macro, like it can be really heavy on your heart and on your body. To make space for that, we talk a lot about like self-care, taking breaks, finding personal days, being with your community, finding laughter, joy. It's really important and essential. Otherwise, you'll get burnt out. You'll want to leave. I've had people who up and just left the entire institution of organizing because it's just too much. Bring that. We will win. We have won. Organizing works, and take care of yourself along the way.
Nice, awesome. You spoke about defunding the police and underfunded community-based organizations. And that kind of comes with our field. It's almost like normal, and it's almost normalized that we just have to deal with the limited resources that we're given. Can you tell me of a time that you have navigated through or overcome your limited resources and you still pull through?
Yeah, for sure. We're definitely underfunded. I'm lucky privileged at CPD. We have so many programs or departments, some of which get funded really well. We're able to get supplemental funds to support things like our education justice, our criminal legal work, and our immigration work. As every year is not funded enough to pay for the one or two staff we have and the events we want to throw with our affiliates and their members. We never meet our budget that we have for the year. So we're constantly under that kind of stress. And the goals to meet with funders, to sell our work, which is problematic in and of itself because we're trying to like dismantle capitalism, but we have to work within capitalism, even as a nonprofit, to sell our work and get funding for our communities. And it can be really challenging. Like all of those things, a lot of funders, a lot of philanthropists don't see them as winning battles, as I said already. Or like education justice, people don't see it as urgent as other things. So how do I overcome those? We have put in a lot more effort in like our organizing strategy. Our team that we work with, our development team, our fundraisers has started to train us on how to find prospects who believe in our work. And most importantly, is to build relationships. A lot of the people who fund our work are just regular people. A lot of them used to be organizers, or they come from a world that is progressive enough. And so to build authentic relationships with them in order to build a story around your work that resonates for them and to stay. One of the things we have this year is fun, for me anyway, and some people on my team, is Fundraising Friday, which means build in the work blocks to fundraise. You got to be diligent.
Wow. Vonne, it sounds like you have a lot of accomplishments in your work, but what do you think is your most proud of recent accomplishments?
Yeah. One thing I'm really excited about, after the 2020 uprisings, after George Floyd's murder, a lot of the organizations we work with, which focus on young folks and education justice, I'm thinking of One Police Free Schools. They actually won, and police were ordered out of their schools. And this happened with Leaders Igniting Transformation out of Milwaukee and Latinos Unidos Siempre in Salem, Oregon. We were really excited to support them in their win. They had been fighting. This didn't just spring out of nowhere. They had been building coalition, building their base, building their power, going to the right people at the district level, built the right connections, and again, flex their power to actually get police out of school. So that was a huge victory for us. And we're continuing to try to do that across the country.
Nice. That's awesome. It's something to be proud of. Now that you've completed that, what are you working on now? Can you tell us more about that?
One thing I'm excited about right now, and this happens to be in Atlanta where I'm based, the city of Atlanta has proposed and is starting to build a $90 million, 300-acre facility slated to be the largest facility in the country for cop training, for militarized cop training, to continue to repress and oppress Black folks in the city, because this came, again, as a response to the uprisings and to some Black liberation efforts that folks were leading. All of us across the Center for Popular Democracy, some of our affiliates in the state of Georgia and the surrounding, are planning to join them for a week of action, March through 11th, to continue to demand that, one, the city pull the lever and stop Cop City, which they're unlikely to do. But what might happen is that we can pull the corporations who are funding this, or get them to pull funding. And then the last thing is we're asking the contractors to pull out. They were already successful in getting the first contractors to pull out. They're successful in getting Coca-Cola to pull out. And they've been successful in stalling. This was supposed to happen. Like they were supposed to start building a while ago, but they've been successful in stopping those things. And since they murdered one of the people who are occupying the forest, there's been a lot of national publicity around it. So I'm going to be working with the affiliates we work with at CPD to show up in solidarity and push the corporations and those contractors to pull out and show up and make some noise, some direct action. Because like half of the police that they'll be training are not in Georgia, not in Atlanta. So this is a national issue as they continue to try to build police morale, apparently, and fund $90 million into a repressive force instead of, once again, all of the things that could actually benefit our communities.
Wow. I really liked how you talked about, you knew maybe that you weren't going to stop this from happening, but you guys are already making a change, getting all these sponsors to pull out. That's awesome. And just letting people know and getting the word out. Is there any story that you can tell us that illustrates what you do or your experience working in this field?
Yeah, and I know I just talked about what's current, but honestly, the first story that comes to mind is my very first story as like a 15-year-old. And it resonates for me because it was my first win. It's one of the things that got me addicted to this work. And I think what gets a lot of people addicted to it are easy, quick, impactful wins. Our first campaign, no lie, was around improving our bathrooms in our high school. We did a survey. What's the most annoying thing? What would you change? And a lot of people are like, they close the bathrooms. There's no access. They're gross. There's no toilet paper. There's no soap. It's a basic need. People are like, I hold it for the whole 8 hours I'm at school. We launched a campaign. We took pictures. We had meetings with the principal. We called the media. We had rallies. We did all of the things, all the behind the scenes things that people think activists don't do. We did all of those things. And I remember getting called out of my class by the principal, having a meeting. He was like mad at us because we had been on the news. And he's negotiating with us we're at the principal's table and we're not in trouble. It feels a little bit like that, but we stood up for ourselves. We made our demands and we won. They hired more janitors. They cleaned the bathrooms. They opened them up. And I was like, if this is what organizing can do, like on this local level, like think about the change we can make at the state, the national, the global level. I'm giving my 15-year-old self a lot of credit. I probably wasn't thinking that big, but in hindsight, I think that's what really juiced me up. And that's what it's all about. That is what we're trying to do. We're trying to find everyday people with unfortunate everyday problems and give them a voice and empower them to make sustainable, impactful, transformative change.
Love it. Oh my gosh. I love that story though. I think that you're very right. There's always that like small little win and it just drags us into it. And it's like always finding a bigger win because there always is one. There's always one. But I did want to ask, how does art play into the part of the work that you do?
Yeah, art has always been important when thinking about community organizing, right? Like you had cultural artists in the 60s, you had Nina Simone writing and singing songs about civil rights. You had photographers taking these powerful pictures of Muhammad Ali, his protests against the war, all of these things that really capture the nation's attention. I also see it, so there's two other ways. One, in mass protests and activism work, people will make really amazing banners that are colorful and draw your eye. People will hang them from walls. These days, people and some of the folks we work with will do projections against walls to call out whatever their target is doing and what they're up to. They'll call them out by name with some kind of image that shames them or creates some kind of pressure. That's really popular these days. And it gets the conversation going. And then the other thing that I see almost every day, and the thing that CPD does, is graphics and using social media as a way to get people involved. And graphics are super important in that. We have whole teams where their whole job is to create graphics and to create videos that really tell a story of what's happening in like a visual and creative way and can bring attention to the cause in ways that really capture people. I think that are also rooted in like culture. It's insanely important. Like cultural activism is a lane for young people and young and old to engage in, to move people.
Absolutely. Has there ever been a moment in your line of work where you experienced like a sense of awe?
Yeah, a sense of awe. Yeah, it actually wasn't in my professional organizing, but in 2020, there were uprisings across the country, including in New York. And I did do some like on the side organizing with a group of Black leaders in the city to create and move a march and a rally through Brooklyn, calling demands to defund the police and to hold police accountable for the murders that they had been committing. And it was beautiful. There were a couple different rallies. One that I remember in detail was when we did a march and we ended in front of the city council member's house, like him and his partner or his boyfriend's house. And we like filled up the street, like tons of folks, mainly Black folks. And we called out the names of those, actually, Ava was there and read some of those names of the folks who had been murdered by police in the last few years. We had moments of silence. We had these flowers to commemorate and show respect for their lives. And then we ended, because this was 2020 when COVID was wild, but people were still out there, and we were like, we need to find some Black joy. So we ended with a dance party, and we had a DJ out there, and it was that time when that song, "You're About to Lose Your Job," which again, art, right? Like that kind of music like got people pumped up, right? So "You're About to Lose Your Job," talking to police, was like hyping people up. I remember standing back and being like, this is beautiful. We can have the rage and we can have the joy. And those are so important in this work. Seeing everybody collectively together was definitely a moment of awe and joy.
I want to hear more about that story someday. I want to hear more details, but for the sake of time, when you were talking about art, you actually mentioned a little bit about storytelling. So can you tell us a little bit more about how storytelling works in your line of work and how it influences and educates people?
Yeah, stories are another thing that is central to this work. From the very moment you meet someone and you want to bring them into whatever issue you're working on, let's say you meet a parent and you want them to work on education justice issues, you start with, what is your story? What is the issue? Tell us about yourself. What's going on with your young people? That should inform you as an organizer, and it helps them to speak life to their story, and it helps them feel and be validated, because their story matters. The power that we have as everyday people is our stories. It is our experiences that like drive us in this work. We also uplift stories when we talk to decision makers, legislators, city council folks. We want them to know this is not just a statistic. This is not just a constituent 125. This is Amy Johnson, and her son with disabilities did not get the services that your city is supposed to provide. Putting a name to the face, and that's what moves decision makers, or it should move decision makers, not all the time. And it helps make us as people real. My last point is this: narratively, unfortunately, conservatives and the right have done a really good job of telling a story of how their country is being taken over. That's how Trump got into power. He's told a very succinct, very false story about the threats in this country. The left, I was just studying this, has not done that. We do not tell a comprehensive story about what we are trying to build. We're against a lot of things, but we have not told a story about what we're trying to build. What you hear is they hate the cops, instead of what we need and what we deserve are jobs, housing, day, like actual things, again, that'll improve our society. We're not telling that story. It's one of the things that we need to be working on. I know our team is working on, is telling a concrete, comprehensive story that the general public, folks who are in the middle, folks who, can relate to, because whether you're Black, white, doesn't matter. 99% of us are facing the same kinds of issues. Low-income white folks are having very similar experiences to immigrants, to Black folks, to brown folks. If we can tell that story and get people to share their stories even more, I think the more chance we have to win our fights.
Wow. That's incredible. I remember being there for the action that you described. I even got a little emotional when you described it. I remember listening to one specific trans lady's story, and it was incredible. If you guys want to know more, we can definitely have another episode about all of the actions that we've done and protesting. You mentioned it's just slightly, but I want to know exactly what communities are being affected the most by these issues, and why do you think that is?
The communities that are being affected the most by these issues. I want to start with Black folks in this country, Black women, Black trans women. Since the start of this country, Black folks have been under the heel of white supremacy. And Black folks have been the labor that this country's economic wealth is built upon. Jim Crow and its different iterations continue to persist in this country. I do center Black folks in my politic and in my organizing. People say there's not the Olympics of oppression, which is true also in every area if it comes to like Black rates of infant mortality or maternity complications or incarceration or you name it, Black people are at the bottom of that list. And it's not an accident. That is how it is. So we organize Black folks because they are most highly impacted. We also organize immigrant communities, folks who are undocumented, folks who don't have the privileges and the rights of many of us take for granted. Parents can't vote in the school board elections if they don't have their papers, right? And yet their kids go to those schools, just as a small example. We organize low-income white folks. We organize rural white communities whose jobs are not giving them a fair wage or a living wage, or the companies they work for participate in wage theft and don't pay them what they deserve, or who are facing climate disasters or environmental justice impacts. So those communities as well. If I were to summarize our main folks, as well as queer and trans folks who are at most of the time intersections of these issues, we don't have any specific like queer or gay rights legislation or policies that we work on. But we do try to center issues. For example, in the Police Free Schools fight, queer students are disproportionately affected by police harassment. That's something we lift up in like our statistics and in our reports, as well as just Black girls. And it's really widespread though, like since we're national, it's urban, it's rural, it's Black, brown, and white, and everything in between. If you feel the foot of racial capitalism and white supremacy, you are our people. And as I said, that's 99% of us. There's only a small percentage of elites who are in power. We're trying to build a base that includes pretty much everyone.
Absolutely. What would you say to students like us who want to make a difference in social justice?
I would say you're already doing it. I've learned this from Ava, that social work, human services, there's macro and micro levels of it. And I would say to keep in mind, right, when doing this work, that both of them are needed. There's advocacy, there's organizing, and I would consider where y'all do like service work, urgent service work for the people who are affected by these big systems. And I'm trying to change all these big systems. But in the meantime, they're still very much in place. And we have to support people on the ground who are affected by issues that cause challenges in the family unit, challenges in homes, and beyond. And to keep that in mind, just like I think we need to do that more. And the place I'm at, and I think the place y'all are at, is like reminding yourselves that these are 300, 400, 500-year institutions that have caused the issues that y'all are trying to work on and to fix within communities, within families. And that's all part of one big pie of American dysfunction, and that we are allies, the different levels, and probably could be working together more.
I think you did a really great job of summarizing that and connecting it. I think you said it perfectly. You defined that perfectly, and we all should be working together. Yeah.
I agree so much with what you just said. On that note, I love some good volunteer work. Do you know of any good volunteer opportunities that our listeners can get involved in, or other groups that we should be speaking to?
I'll start with the Stop Cop City. If you just Google that, there's a million things that come up. It's a decentralized effort and a campaign. There isn't like a hub. These are all the Stop Cop City groups or organizations. Community Movement Builders, they're a Black-led organization who have been working to build Black freedom, Black liberation, and Black self-determination in Black communities here In Atlanta, they could always use support, people knocking doors, people phone banking, as well as the tree sitters and the forest defenders, which are mainly white folks, and they camp out, and there's also a solidarity fund because there are still 5 people who are behind bars on charges for domestic terrorism, wild false charges. There's a solidarity fund to support them, and I think to support the tree sitters too. That's one way. And there's a week of action, March 4th through 11th. If folks want to come down to Atlanta and support where you're at, there will be opportunities to support in that way. The second group I would name is Movement for Black Lives. They're across the country, national organization, fighting for a slate of different issues that affect Black communities. And I mention Black communities a lot because if we pass policies and practices that protect Black folks, everyone's going to be protected, right? As one of the most oppressed groups. So even if you're not a Black person, if you believe in our country needs to progress in a way that is healthy for everybody, I would say support Black communities in all those kinds of ways. Show up. If they want you to call your senator or call your council member, do that. If they want you to sign a petition, do that and send it to other folks. Have conversations with white, Black, brown allies to start changing minds, because we do need to be telling stories to change minds of the folks that we are with. That's not a volunteer thing. That's just a advice thing to everybody.
I like how you mildly touched on the dark side of organizing, getting arrested. Right. But anyway, after all of the hard work that you've done, the organizing, the huge platforms that you have across the country, working on several different issues in several different areas, what do you want to see in 10 years as a result of the work that you're doing?
One thing I'll say just on what you were saying around arrest, we've all learned is that getting arrested is also strategic. Like Martin Luther King, civil rights leaders, they were getting arrested on purpose to call attention to it. We also do that at CPD. People will plan to get arrested in order to get media attention. And it works anyways. But also those people were not planning on getting arrested. So it is hard. What do I hope for in 10 years? One of the things I hope for and fight for is more local community control. And what I mean by that is if you go to a city council meeting in your city, I guarantee you there's 5 people there. I'm not even one of the people there. People are not involved at their city levels or at their school district levels. And that's where a lot of decisions that matter happen. We're not encouraged to participate locally. And in 10 years, I hope that number goes up, that it goes from 5 to 25. That more people see a space and their place in co-governance. Because right now we put a lot of trust in folks to lead us. And there is more space for us to participate in community. Another major point, in 10 years is not that long for organizing. We're not going to defund the police, but we might get police out of schools in a lot more cities in 10 years. I feel like in 10 years, police in schools is going to sound wild. People are going to be like, why did we didn't always have police in schools. This is somewhat of a new concept. So I'm hoping in 10 years, people are like, oh my God, there's still police in those schools. They're one of the last ones, because that is not what you do anymore. People understand that is toxic. In 10 years, I hope to see our city budgets go towards the investments. I've talked about this at least 7 times now, so y'all already know the investments we need, and away from policing and militarization, jails and prisons. And I'll stop there. Yeah, that's a hard one. Those are some of the things that I hope to see.
They sound like good, reasonable goals. I hope that happens as well. Is there anything else that you didn't get to say that you wanted to share? Anything else you want us to know?
I guess one thing I'll add is We talked about the role of service, advocacy we touched on, which is just like litigation and that kind of thing, and like legislative policies and organizing. But there's also a fourth strand of like electoral organizing that's really important. I wasn't always a believer, as like someone who was even more radical than I am now. I was like, forget, do y'all cuss on this? Can I say? Yeah, fuck elections, right? I was like, fuck elections. That is not where we need to be putting our energy. We need like more radical solutions. I'm not going to rely on the mayor, the governor, but like it is a super powerful way. If we can do all of that at once, it's another important strand in transforming our communities, our cities, our states, is like us running for those offices, us finding people to be the school board president and be on the school board council. School boards are won by 200, 300 votes. Imagine what kind of school board we could have that meets communities' needs, isn't worried about drag queen reading circles or what bathrooms our kids get to go to, and are actually care about the things we care about. We got to exercise our electoral power as well as doing the grassroots organizing and service work. So just want to lift that part up.
That's a great thing to leave us with, Vonne. It's very important to become more involved. I feel like people shy away from politics. They're afraid of it. They're ignorant of it. I guess we just have to figure out how to change that.
Go to your local legislative meetings. I can't emphasize it enough. It makes things happen.
Yeah.
Anytime you get a chance, go.
Go to your legislative meetings, go to city council. We just want to thank you again for being on Practically Social Work with us as students of social work, and seeing this as a possible future for one of us is pretty exciting. It's pretty inspiring. You do a lot and a lot of great work. I'm so happy that you could spend your time with us today. And that's it. I guess we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks
for
y'all.
joining.
I'm around for any more conversations, questions. I appreciate y'all having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Before we depart for the day, we want to remind you that if you have topics you would like to hear about or just have general comments, feel free to reach out and submit those. Or if you have a topic you want to discuss with us here, reach out. You're always welcoming of making new connections.
Our site is linked below, but please check out our TikTok, our Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. Talk to you later, everyone, and thanks for listening.
And remember, take care of your future. Take care of each other.
Take care of yourself.